Namaste everyone, thank you for joining us. We will begin today's event with an invocation prayer, followed by two treatments performed by Mohan Riyad and Anubhava. Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samashava Nirvignam Guru Deva Sarvakarishu Sarvada.
श्रीमद्वतीय चरितामृतमन्त्रया पीत्वा वीणैः सुनीता मनुजा भवे वेङ्कटाचलपतेरिव भक्ति श्रीदानप गुरुदेव नमो नमस्ते नमो नमस्ते.
Akshayam, Akshayam,
Thank you both. Namaste. I am Shorted Ramanujan, one of the members of Akshayam, which was established in 2016. Akshayam is a team of young Hindu professionals of the Hindu Temple Society of North America in New York. We volunteer at the temple to preserve the Hindu tradition and practices, engage in discussions, and aim to build legacy for future generations of Hindu practitioners. Akshayam organizes monthly discussions as well as part of the unique learning series and annually the Anubhava Conference.
Namaste. I am Vigneshwari Shivakumari, one of the sons of Akshayam. With the blessings of Sri Mahavallabha and all of the Devas, the Hindu Temple Society of North America welcomes everyone assembled here, and also those who are remotely viewing this through the live streaming, to this annual Anubhava conference organized by the Akshayam. The theme for this year's conference is Pride of Hindu Identity. Hinduism is formed from different streams of Vedic scriptures, Puranas, Itihasas, rituals, philosophy, etc. It is not a religious faith which centers on a particular name of God or based on a particular scripture. It comprises different philosophical thoughts, stories, rituals, practices that differ from each other, but all stand together. It can be considered as a harmonious federation of followers of many faiths. It doesn't have a founder as well as any central organization. It gives complete freedom to its believer to search his or her own spiritual pathway. It is not a religion of dogmas. There are simply no binding requirements to be a Hindu, not even a belief in God. So, it is a religion of liberal faith. This nature of Hinduism led to a lot of people to take and interpret it in their own ways. Hinduism acknowledges that all ways of life and beliefs are equally valid. Nothing is rejected by Hinduism. The main reason for it is that it is a faith system populated by identities at once ancient and modern hosting texts, philosophy, belief systems, and schools of thought that do not necessarily all agree with each other. It comprises theistic and atheistic systems. Different philosophical schools and religious traditions within Hindu faith system hold different vital beliefs. Chanvaka philosophy, Nyaya system, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Mimamsa school, Vedanta system, Jnana Yoga, or the discipline of knowledge, Karma Yoga, or the discipline of action, Bhakti Yoga, or the discipline of action, Puranic and Tattvic tradition, and so on. Tolerance of diversity in Hinduism constantly revived the tradition with new efforts to engage people to face new worldly and spiritual challenges. We need to develop and preserve Hindu philosophy and culture as well. The spirit of embracing diversity in Hinduism is really the key to keep things going. With this thought in mind, we have chosen the theme of this year's conference as Pride Hindu Identity.
Before we commence the next session, we have a couple of housekeeping rules. Hope everyone has first registered their name at the registration table. We have two separate books, one for Akshayam members and one for general population that is here and interested in joining Akshayam as well. Second, may I request everyone to please put your cell phones in vibrate mode. Third, the restrooms and bathrooms are on the left side of the hall. The drinking water fountain is in the back. Anyone is welcome to take a cup. If you need any help, please seek any of the Akshayam volunteers. We're all wearing this badge and are happy to help. As the entire program is being live streamed, please cooperate in maintaining silence. Make sure not to cross the camera. And lastly, please feel free to leave your coats in the back over there. And feel free to keep your shoes on unless you are coming near or onto the stage. So up next, we'll have Shalini Shivakumar introduce our first presenter.
Welcome to Sri Mythology. It is my honor to introduce him as the first guest speaker for today's program. Sri Mythology is the founder of the View Learning Lab, based at Coimbatore, a textile city in southern India, popularly known as Manchester of South India. Sri is a seeker and a storyteller, rooted in Vedanta and Bhakti sutras. After serving in Svala Seva at Chinmaya Mission for over 3 years, he became an active member of Chinmaya Youth for about 4 years. Through his stints at Columbia, he was able to tap into formal teaching and pedagogy. He socialized with over 2,000 children over the past 3 years and seeks to both embody and transmit Bharatiya in an authentic manner to the next generation. Yuha signifies strategic alignment, movement, and clarity of purpose, a conscious arrangement of knowledge that awakens insight and action, aspiring to work towards a living synthesis of continuity and creativity, tradition, and transformation. We're eager to see Srihari Vittalji and hear his beautiful talk and presentation on Hindu identity by virtual mode from Coimbatore. There will be a Q&A session with him towards the end of this presentation. Without further ado, I request him to grace us with this speech. Srihari Vittalji, we now are available for your
Sure. Thank you. Namaste, everyone. Am I audible? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So let us start off with a JJ. When I say Ganapati Bappa, you all say, there you go. Ganapati Bappa.
Moria.
Ganapati Bappa.
Moria.
One more time. Ganapati Bappa.
Moria.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all the people over there, all the Hindus present at the temple. Thank you to the Hindu Temple Society of North America for having us, for having invited us. Thank you to, first of all, Ganesha for making this happen and for everything else, of course. And Ravi Garu, thank you so much. I think really, really grateful for this opportunity. So, and for all of you who are working, doing various things to make this happen, be it the event management or this whole setup, I'm really, really grateful to each one of you. And so today, we thought it's very important to speak about Hindu identity. I think that's the theme that we have for Anubhava this year as well. And since we are a very young organization, we are Vyuha Learning Labs, as you all might have heard. We are headquartered in Coimbatore, in a beautiful city called Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu, very close to Isha. There are very many ashrams in and around here. The Western Ghats are also close by. What we seek to do is we are trying to take the Indian knowledge systems into contemporary K-12 education in schools, and we identify as a learning organization rooted in the Rishi Parampara, and we seek to translate timeless wisdom into living educational experiences. So I have my team here, and none of the work we do is possible by one of us, but it's happening because we're working as a team together, trying to pool in our inner resources in some sort of service in the outer world. So let me quickly introduce my team. My name is, of course, Sri Hari. We also have Namrata. Namrata is Yogacharya. She's trained in the Sri Krishnamacharya tradition. She was a chartered accountant, but she's taken on the path of yoga, learning and teaching yoga. She's into yoga therapy as well. She also happens to be my Dharma Patni. So, welcome, Namrata. Namaste.
Namaste, thank
Uh,
you.
we also have Nidhi Desai. Namaste, Nidhi. She is pursuing her master's in epistemology and Hindu philosophy. So she's studying the Nyaya. I think one of you also spoke about Nyaya, Vaisheshika, the various darshanas. So she is studying the Nyaya Darshana as a framework for epistemology in Manipal University at Udupi, very close to Udupi, Krishna. Um, we also have Samskriti Shastri. Namaste, Samskriti. Yeah. So Samskriti is a Sanskrit student. She is pursuing her master's in Sanskritam. She is also a very graceful dancer, a musician, an artist in its truest sense. And all of us are into various parts of, curriculum design, creative work. How can we take this, thriving knowledge in creative forms for today's generation? I think that's what Samskriti also does through her creative music production and all of that. And we also have Aishwarya. Aishwarya has a background in aeronautical engineering, yeah, and she then pursued her youth empowerment program from Chennai Mission. She committed a year of learning and service, learning Vedanta. And so this is half of the team. Rest of them are in various parts of the country doing different work. But we thought, in order to share about Hindu identity, and given it's an online interaction, instead of me giving a presentation, it could be very meaningful to have a conversation. And I thought I should invite all these beautiful people into this conversation. So let me get started. I would like to start with a very pertinent question on the routing itself, right? So could you take me to your earliest memory of Sanatana? Probably maybe a person who influenced a moment in your life that sort of turned things around, sparked something, or some practice that you picked up or was given to you in the family. What was the first experience or feeling dharma in your life? When did it feel alive for you? If you could share some experiences. So maybe for this, can I invite Samskriti?
Sure. Namaste. So, earliest memory I have associated with Sanatana Dharma is first of all, it was the environment itself at home. But if I had to point one thing, then it was the evening ritual. So before we had dinner, we had this thing where all of us, as family, we sat together and we recited shlokas, and then we also my mother would explain the meaning. My father would also bring in his point of views, even after dinner as well. So it was a family ritual. I would like to tag Namrata for her views.
Thank you. I think the earliest memory I have two. One is every summer vacation in school. My tata, that is my grandfather, he would make me read. So the Rajaji's book on Mahabharata is there, and then there is this set on the Upanishads. I would have to read it aloud, and we would have discussions. He would come up with very, very pertinent debates, and he would stir seeds and questions in me that were not very apparent, and he wouldn't give me any answers. So staying with those questions itself was something profound for me. I've even watched him shed so many tears as he would go through all the verses of the Mahabharata towards the end. I still hold that very dearly for me because I can see the power of that move such a person who is so well read and experienced. So that is the one experience. Second is when I went to Badrinath. And I, for the first time, I was able to see the cave of Sri Vyasa Rishi. And for the first time, I got to know that all of our Vedas and different texts were actually produced in that very space. So it is one thing to read about these, but a totally different thing to be in the presence of those sacred spots. So I think this is something I'll never ever forget.
Lovely. Aishwarya, would you like to chip in?
Yeah, sure. For me, it's when you ask for the earliest childhood memory, I'm immediately taken back to my childhood, where this is just before the bedtime. I sit with my parents, and I wouldn't sleep if I don't get to hear a story before I go to bed. So my parents would tell me stories from the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, or the Panchatantra. The way, more than the stories, it was the way that they told me about it. So I have this beautiful picture in my mind of I can still feel how I visualized Rama back then. So Rama was this character who was very calm, very strong, but he was extremely brave. Sita was somebody who was so beautiful and strong at the same time. So I can still feel those personalities within me even till today. And one thing interestingly for me was I used to always get drawn to these intense episodes, intense moments in the story, especially fights. The fight between Shurpanakha and Lakshmana was my favorite. And, where Jatayu was fighting with Ravana, or the final battle between Rama and Ravana itself. Because, like, I knew the story, like, I knew what would happen eventually in the end, but still I would wait for my parents to tell me that story so that it will give me that sense of satisfaction, that joy,
Yeah.
is winning over the evil. Like I wait for that final conclusion to come. So, and even in Panchatantra I used to, with Panchatantra it was slightly different. I used to laugh about, or find it very funny how some characters are really foolish and they can't understand so much. I used to scold those characters. So, like I think that's the beauty of stories. Back then, I feel I didn't value them much. I was like, oh, this is very nice to listen to, and it was like a bedtime story. But today, if I think back, I can see how through subtly it felt very personal, like very personally ideas of dharma, viveka, all of these were introduced. So, like I still wouldn't forget all of these memories.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And Didi, any thoughts? Anything you would like to add? Not able to hear you.
Now,
Yes, audible.
and okay. Yeah. So the question is really interesting and really like all of the perspectives. So coming back to the question, I think see first of all I was born during Ganesh Chaturthi itself. So that culture is already inherited in me, and yes, it's always there. And so coming back to the very core thing is that there is not one person or one moment or one memory. It's like a collection of everything. It's not just one thing because my parents used to read me the Shastras and we used to discuss a lot of things really. The way what Sanskriti said, it was the same for me also. For 1 hour, we used to discuss a lot of learnings and all of that. So it came like a rhythm which is like a daily part. So it used to happen
Mhm.
every day. Yeah, so that's how it came.
Fantastic. And I think that leads us to a very important question, right? Of course, we have a lot of influences, experiences as we grow up, but somewhere along the line, we probably, lose touch or lose those communities which keeps us grounded. Life takes its own, turn and path. And so there is also something that happens that also makes a shift. Um, and remember our roots again, or probably seek um, answers to some questions that we really are, that are burning in us. So, was there any moment when, where Hinduism or anything from Sanatana moved something in you and something that was born out of that? Probably something you consciously chose to pursue, to learn, anything along those lines, and what changed in you because of the choice? So the floor is open. Anyone who would like to share here can go ahead.
I'll come in here, Hari.
Sure.
So I think personally for me, it is when I had the bhagyam, the saubhagyam to meet my yoga teacher, Sri Raghu Anantanarayanan. I think it was, I realized, so I had been doing a lot of yoga until then, but in various different forms, right? I had been doing what is called this studio yoga and different types of yoga. They call it all kinds of things, okay? And that too being in a city like metropolitan city like Mumbai, what have you, right? But I really understood that there is a deep sacred practice called yoga, and it is really not just limited to the external asanas or the breath work that they call it pranayama. They don't even call it pranayama, but there is so much more. There are 8 angas in yoga, and it has so much to do with the mind. It has so much to do about reality of making meaning in the world, of really understanding one's own dukkha, and also dukkha in our community, in nature. What is my true nature? I think when I met my teacher, that was the biggest question that I was left with. Who am I really? Why am I here? And what is this world? I think these 3 questions are like my forever questions, and I didn't find any answers for these in the outer world. No matter, so I was told that I am a chartered accountant. I was told that I am, a city goer. I've been given so many identities, but none of them felt complete. None of them felt convincing enough for me. And I guess the practice of yoga just gave me the sense to keep inquiring into this question, and also it gave me a perspective into dharma itself. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I think this was a very important moment for me. The things that changed in my life was, I think, the quality of my relationships with the world,
Hmm.
with nature, with my own body, with food, drastically different. I think nothing else could have done it, other than my own Sanatana Dharma.
Beautiful. Maybe now I would like to invite Samskriti, since Sanskrit has been a big part, continues to be a big part of your life and your learning. What would you like to share here?
Um, so that one point of change in my life was when my father passed away when I was about 10 or 11 years old. So I started to get these questions: why am I living? What's life, death? All these questions. And thankfully, I was handed books when I was very young. So even before I could read properly, I would still go through, pictures and stuff. So these books were, source of my answers, also like a comfort zone. So, and thankfully, Sanatana Dharma, I started to find my answers there. It was a slow process. But when I took up Sanskrit graduation, so when I started studying there from an acharya, so the way of learning in our dharma, nothing is like, if you say this is so and so, you're not obliged to accept it immediately. You have the rights to
Hmm.
question, have the rights to argue.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, once you can ask, you can ask, you can learn till you get satisfied. So so I was doing this, and Upanishad texts and all of these, and because I was learning Sanskrit, I was able to get into the etymology, the roots of it, so importance of the words. So all of this gave me, you know, made me who I am today. So yeah.
Beautiful. I would like to share, actually, I resonated with your first sharing, Samskriti, about your passing away of your father. Something similar happened when my grandmother uh, left her body. So she was very crucial, in my presence, crucial a presence in my life. And, when it was around after my university, after my studies at LSE, I was just back home, and there was this void, palpably was able to feel her absence. And that's when I got to know about a summer camp that was being organized by Chinnamshi. So it was a call for volunteers And the first thing that flashed in my mind was this memory of me attending as a child this summer camp organized by Chinmaya, and I only remember that it was so cool and so much fun, right? So I thought, okay, it's probably a very meaningful way to spend my vacation. If not, I would just be probably hanging out with friends and whatnot. So I thought, let me do this, and I think that was one choice which I'm very grateful for until today, and I think I would have always be, because if not for that, I don't know if I would have gone so deep into Dharma, into Sanatana, into Vedanta. Um, that was one step, and that step cascaded into a lot of experiences, exposure. I think I was part of a lot of yatras. We were doing a lot of stage drama, nataka, where we would take up different aspects of Sanatana, maybe a story from Itihasa, or probably modernizing some ideas from the texts like our scriptures. So we would do a lot of ideation and also express it creatively. Apart from this, I was fortunate to be a part of few projects where we would write textbooks on value education or history. We did this massive effort of rewriting history from an Indian lens called the RRR textbooks. It's called Radiant Bharat, Resilient Bharat, Resurgent Bharat, RRR. This is meant for teenagers between the age 14 to 18, 14 to 17, 18 to 18. So that also gave me a lot of insight into what this civilization is. We are so used to knowing a certain version of what our civilization is, but when you look at it from the Indian lens, there's so much actually that we are, um, I think, intentionally not given or not taught. So that was actually eye-opening for me, and that also translated into a lot of self-reflection. And I think COVID was another turning point for me personally, where I got a lot of time to reflect, read Bhagavatam especially, and I also experienced a lot of death around me in my loved ones. And I think that's when I started conducting some of these online sessions, be it Itihasa, Purana, Shloka, Yoga. We would conduct online sessions, and kids from across the world would connect online on Zoom to interact and learn about our Dharma. Um, we started there, and with a lot of energy of the children, parents coming together, I think you heard what is today is definitely all of that put together. But these two instances are still very, very alive in me now that I look back. I think both of these have played a very, very big role in the trajectory that I have chosen, ever since. So good. I think we have discussed about the roots, also that shift and how it has kind of changed us. But having said that, I'm sure we all experience some kind of tension when we try to navigate this world we inhabit, right? While we, of course, want to stay rooted in our dharma, there are certain pockets of the society or certain systems which are not necessarily designed to embody those principles. And in navigating that, we do experience some tension. So, what are some instances like that, and how are we trying to navigate that?
I
Maybe
would like to
Nidhi?
share.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the biggest tension right now that I have faced, because everyone knows that I'm studying about the Hindu Dharma. I'm working with IKS, that is Indian Knowledge Systems. So the very big tension that personally every other person has, every other person says is that what is Hindu Dharma? What is Dharma? What you are doing is just purely glorifying your identity, glorifying your religion, and just having a unscientific way of throwing things, inserting things into some or the other place. That's what we are doing is what I have heard. So I struggle with seeing how often people make sweeping conclusions about our own heritage based on the fragmented media parts that they keep without knowing the full
Mm.
or even experiencing it deeply. So I navigate this by consciously returning back to the empirical groundwork of our own text and how we are proving its modern functionality through the work we are doing. So it's not something for glorifying culture. We have our cultures. Every other culture has their way of glorifying it, but we have something which is very empirical, which is very scientific, and which is it is like a holistic perspective. There is experience also. There is reasoning also. There is subjectivity, objectivity, everything, and that's what I
Yeah.
think our work is also doing right now. It's a way. I'm really grateful that we are doing this so that there is an answer to this particular tension.
Mm. Very, very important. Yeah.
Just to
Anybody
add
else
to
would like to?
what, no, I just wanted
Yeah.
to add to one thing.
Go.
I think, Nidhi presented a very important aspect around the scientificity of, many of our traditions. I think some of our earlier generations, at least I can speak from my family and, our own personal experiences, uh, we didn't have access to why are we doing what we are doing, right? And very often many let's say certain generations before us, they didn't have the questions and therefore they didn't have the answers. So I think
Mm.
it is a very important uh, thread to hold the question. And just because a few people don't have the answer doesn't mean that the answer doesn't exist. There is an answer. It is definitely scientific. Um, Possibly we are not reaching out to the best sources out there, but even today, I think with the internet, with a plethora of acharyas around us, it's really not very difficult to find out and give our curiosity the enough substance and enough meat that it needs, metaphorically, right? I think as young people, this is very important, because if there are no answers, the inherent shraddha towards our civilization will be compromised, and that's not something that our civilization stands for. I think even Samskriti pointed out to just this.
Yeah. Definitely.
Just to
And
add on this, yeah, just
go
to
ahead. Go
add
ahead.
on this, I think what Anamrita said is very much the answer that to the question that there is no criticality in the Hindu identity or Hindu dharma. There is this itself points that it is so much critical that our text itself is saying us to question every other thing which is mentioned there and then find the answers. So
Correct.
that is.
Absolutely. I also wanted to share the tension that I often experience is in our work, right? We are often looked at or labeled as this organization that's trying to do dharmic work, right? We are in the dharmic space, we're doing dharmic work. And I often hear a voice that kind of, concludes that, okay, probably, they have left the world of prosperity or the pursuit of prosperity for this pursuit of dharma. Probably they have not found that important, and so they are doing this. These are some voices that come, and I often wonder for myself, where am I coming from, right? For me, I truly feel that it's not this or that. It's never a binary, at least in my head. This is where I really feel my swabhava and swadharma, my innate nature, my innate proclivities will best be served if it is in service of children and in education and learning. Given that we also live certain realities, it doesn't mean we don't need the necessary means to live, to sustain, to prosper. So I always look at it as one and the same, and I try telling people, like sharing my perspective on this. And I also look at prosperity as not just merely wealth, which is why we have an Ashtalakshmi metaphor, right? Wealth or reducing Shri to wealth itself is incomplete, but Shri embodies 8 aspects, not just monetary or let's say uh, prosperity in terms of wealth. It also has well-being and so many others like courage, etc. So this has always been something that has animated me whenever I think about prosperity and sustenance and all of that. So this I think is something very, very, very accessible and relevant in the kind of work that we set out to do. Anybody else who wants to chip in or add before we go on?
I just wanted to share my experience here. Very similar to what Hani told, Um, it's mainly when I interact with the world around me. In terms of one example is very simple in terms of the definition of success. So earlier I used to work at a corporate job, and then I left that and I pursued the youth empowerment program, and now I'm here working with Yuha. So the whole reason was when I was working in corporate, everything looked very beautiful, everything felt perfect, but there was a sense of lack of purpose within me, and that's what actually made me choose a path of purpose. So what I realized during the course of time and yet is that whenever one is working towards a greater good, when one is working towards serving a greater cause, something that benefits a lot of people, one's individual growth is taken care of, which means also one's financial growth is also taken care of. So that's why I feel more aligned with the work that we're doing in Vyuha as well. So whenever I'm talking to people around me, some of them, when they question, they ask me questions like, "Did you do the right thing by leaving your, corporate job and now you're doing this, whatever you're doing currently?" So it's mainly because I think it's with the definition of success, how everybody else looks at success. They equate success to financial gain alone, like what you told. Shri is not just financial gain, right? There is it's the whole well-being of a human being. So wherein from the study that I've done, from my experience, for me, success is not just financial gain, but it's something that's rooted in dharma, something that gives the holistic well-being of myself. So there are these tensions. So sometimes when people question, I also start self-doubting at times. But again, like when there is a satsang, like when you talk to your when I talk to my teachers, when I talk to my friends, like it helps me reflect and come back to that decision of or choice of why I made this decision in my life. Just to
Beautiful.
choose something for the betterment, for a larger good. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think that also highlights the need for satsanga, sangatana, sangati. So those are really, really important in anyone's spiritual unfolding and one's own life. So absolutely. And I also see this our work. Every time we meet, also is a satsang where we discuss a lot of the shastras, reflect on it, just like how we're doing now. And this leads me to the last question. And after that, I think we'll have a small engagement where we can do something with the kids. I see some children there, so we would love to do something with the kids. So here's my last question for all of us. Um, in your work at Yuha, any dharmic work that you do, what is one thing you're aspiring for to awaken in young Hindus, in the next generation, in the world around you? What is that you wish to be a conduit for, to be a medium for and enable?
I'll come in.
Sure.
So from the work, especially from Chimya Mission and the work that we do in Vyuha, one thing that constantly comes back again and again is how our culture, how our Indian knowledge systems we call looks at everything in the holistic perspective. So I wish if this was I had this lens at a much younger age, at a much earlier age, then a lot of things could have changed in life. So I think through the work that we do in Vyuha, if we are able to, if we can bring in that ability to look at things in a holistic manner, it will change a lot of things. Why I specifically feel this has to come up in people is, I think today we see we have this fragmented view of our life. Like for
Hmm.
example, wellness is different from health. Education is separate from values. So and success is different, from just happiness. So I feel because of this fragmented view in life, we always look for quick fixes. Like, what is the immediate thing that I can do? Like, what is the immediate fix that I can get for this? But in our Indian knowledge system, in our culture, we have always seen things holistically. And because of this vision, sustainability was part of our culture. Mental health was like part of our culture. Any problem that we see today was already getting solved because we saw things in a holistic manner. Like when we take some of the courses that we take in our schools, where how beautifully we connect music and math, or geometry into art. So there's a whole, it's all interconnected, but it's only in
Yeah.
our eyes that we look at things in a fragmented manner. And I think this lens also reflects in one's life as one grows older. But if we are able to bring that holistic thinking at a very early age,
Mhm.
I think it
Sure.
can create a transformation in oneself. So
Of
that I
course.
really wish, I wish that we can enable that through our
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to add, I think all we can do is embody that, and children simply just absorb it, model it. There's nothing really to teach, and we cannot expect to teach these things. All we can do is learn, practice, and embody as much as we can. If we falter, get back up and try doing it all over. So, one other idea that I wanted to share that I am really animated about and excited about is I visualize a time where more and more youth find meaning and opportunities of sustenance and prosperity in dharmic work. They not only do this surely just for purpose, of course, that's fundamental, but also can live decently, happily, and well. So, how can we enable that is a question I'm really animated by. And that's what also fuels my work in Vyuha. And how can Vyuha be a conduit for that? So, that's one thing I'm really looking forward to building on. Anybody else, Nidhi, Namrata, would like to add? No? Okay, fantastic. So, I think this is a very good dialogue. I realize there are a few kids there. Can I have you all raise your hands, dear children? Okay. Oh, wow. Quite a few of them there. So let's do a small practice with the kids. And Namrata, I invite you to take it over and then I'll chip in after you're done.
Okay. Can I have all the kids raise your hands? Can we have all our hands raised up? Thank you. Very nice. Yes. Wiggle it a little bit. Very nice. Okay. Now you need to repeat after me and follow my instructions. You need to follow all the things that I'm doing. All right? Okay. Did you know that there are 5 parts to yourself? You are not just one part, you are 5 parts. Did you know that? Let's find out together. Okay? Repeat after me. Aham annam. Aham annam. I'm not able to see you guys. Yes, very nice. Let's all do it together. Let's do it one more time. Aham annam. Aham Annam. Yes? Okay. Next. Aham pranam. Aham pranam. Aham pranam. Aham pranam. Yes? Okay.
Nandita, what does each mean? Aham annam, aham pranam. Probably
We'll
if you
learn
could.
meanings in the end. Let's do the actions first. Okay.
Sure.
Aham manaha. Aham
Aham.
manaha. Aham manaha. Yes. Now let's go to the fourth part. Aham vijnanam.
Aham vijnanam.
Aham vijnanam.
Aham vijnanam.
Aham vijnanam.
Aham vijnanam.
The last one. Okay? Are you guys ready? I need a thumbs up for the last one. Are you guys ready? Yes. Okay? Aham anandam.
Aham anandam.
Show your happiness.
Aham anandam.
Aham anandam.
Aham anandam.
Aham anandam.
Superb, superb. I want all of you to give a silent clap for yourselves. Raise your hand and wiggle it nicely. Silent claps for ourselves. Wonderful. Now, Haryana is asking meaning. I think our kids will know meaning themselves. Do we know what is the meaning of annam? Anybody from our kids know the meaning of annam? I'll give you a hint. You see it every day.
Food.
Food. Yes, 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 yes. Super. Silent claps. So, am I trying to say that I am and we are all food? Do you think we are food? What do you think? Are we food?
No. He's saying no.
No. We are not food, right? But there's something in us which is made up of food. So all the food that we eat becomes our body. That's why we did aham annam. My physical body is my food, right? Okay. Then let's remember what was the second one? Aham pranam. What do you think? What is happening in this way? What is coming up? What do you feel? What is coming up? Sorry, I'm not able to
You're not
hear.
able to hear.
Really sorry.
Something to do with meaning of life. That's what it said. Something to do with life or breathing.
With
Something to do
life,
with
yes,
Breathing.
yes, with life, yes. Prana is the life energy, yes. And one of the ways in which the life energy expresses itself in us is through our breath, right? Can you imagine? Will you be alive even if you are not breathing for more than like 2 or 3 minutes? Some people can hold their breath, but beyond 2 or 3 minutes, if you don't have your breath, would you be alive? Would you have any life? No. So this life energy in you is the second part. Aham pranam. Right? Then what did we say? Aham manaha. What do you think manaha is? Is it this upper story? What is manaha? Any thoughts? We listen to this very often.
Thought or mind?
Mind.
Mind, yes. So can we see the mind? Like, is the mind here? Is the mind here? Is the mind here? Where is the mind? Is it here? Is it here? Where is the mind? Can we see the mind? What do you guys feel? Can we see the mind?
No.
No.
No. So if you can't see it, then how do you know it exists? See, body I can see. That means I know it exists. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Breath I can sense. When I breathe, I can sense pranam. So I know it exists. Right? Mana, my mind. I can't see it. I can't feel it. How do I know it is there? Somebody told you it is there. That means it's there. Huh? Okay, I'm not going to keep you in too much suspense. Oh, somebody has an answer. Yes, yes, please.
I'm using the mind and also make mind decisions.
Sorry, could you please help me listen?
Mind is helping you make decisions.
Mind is helping me make decisions. Very close, but very far. Yeah. Okay. You told me an answer for the next question that I was going to ask. Okay. Mind is not that which is giving us decisions. Mind is helping us experience different emotions. Right? Do you feel happy sometimes? Do you feel sad sometimes? Yes? Yes or no? Yes or no? Sometimes I feel happy, sometimes I feel sad. Yes? Yes, exactly. So, the fact that you feel happy and sometimes you feel sad, that means that you have a mind. It is the mind that feels happy, it is the mind that feels sad. Okay? Body cannot feel happy, no? Breath also cannot feel happy and sad. So something is feeling happy, something is feeling sad. That is mind. Okay. Next, you told me that something is helping me make decisions. That is the fourth one. Vijnanam. Yes? Vijnanam. It is giving you special qualities. It's giving you ethics. It is giving you the ability to differentiate. Right? Aishwarya spoke about Viveka. Right? Viveka. Viveka is the ability to know what is right and what is not right. Right? And based on that, you make a decision. So that is Vijnanam. Aham Vijnanam. We all have Vijnanam. We all know what is right. Okay? And what do you think Anandam is? Have you heard of this? The most important part of us. What is Anandam? Can you tell me? Anandam. What a lovely word. So I am here in Coimbatore. Every other store is called Ananda. Is it a name of a store? What is the meaning of Anandam? Oh, I guess our friends are a bit discussing how they experience Ananda.
Mm.
Right. Okay. How many of you, I want to ask you one question. How many of you love sleeping? Me too. I can sleep as much as I can. As much as I want, I can sleep. I can go on sleeping. After a good night's sleep, when you wake up in the morning, what do you feel? How do you feel? What do you feel? Can you
I
tell
feel
me? Can
lovely.
anyone tell me?
Tired.
Oh, you feel more tired? Oh, I'm saying after a good night's sleep,
Sound sleep.
sound sleep. It's like I only know
I
that
feel
last I went to
so.
sleep and then I woke up directly.
I feel so energized.
Energized, exactly. You feel you can go and you can do anything in the world, isn't it? So, Ananda is that part of us which is always energetic, vibrant, flourishing, and happy, joyous part of ourselves, and it is always there in us. When we eat bad food, when we don't sleep well, and all, this Anandam gets covered up. So, what is a good way to do? Be in Ananda, to eat good and sleep well, stay hydrated. I know we learn all this from our teachers, but it's so boring. It's actually not very boring, no? Imagine you can feel good and vibrant all the time. Why would we not want to do that? Isn't it? Right. So, to experience more Anandam, I'm going to invite Haryana to lead us through a nice bhajan now.
Okay, sure. Before that, Ravi Garu, are we out of time? I just wanted to quickly check where are we with the time. Yeah.
Our time is up. And maybe
Can you
one question from. Okay. Thank you for sharing your information. We all enjoyed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's a very engaging presentation. Up next, we'll be inviting one of the senior members of Akshayam, Mr. Karthik Ramakrishnan, for a brief talk to share his experiences. Karthik has been a member and a leader in Akshayam since 2021, so please give a warm round of applause for Karthik.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a ground before I begin, I wanted to share a quick quote from Vivek Pradhan from Sri Adi Shankaracharya. It says, "Na gachati vinapano vyadi raushadura shabdatana vinapano shanubhava brahma shabdheti muchate." What it means is that a disease is not going to leave off your body just by uttering the name of the medicine. Very similarly, without realizing the Brahman itself, you cannot realize the Brahman itself just by uttering the name. So that brings us to the main ethos of Akshayam, which is basically doing seva. You have to immerse yourself in doing seva. You have to immerse yourself into the temple functions in order for to lead it. Sure. Sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk again. My Karthik Ramakrishnan, I was Akshayam member for a long time. Now I have moved on to something different in my life, and I'm sure the next generation is here to take over the path. What I wanted to share with you all is something from Vivek Shodavani, from the Adi. It says, Nagatsati Vina Pano Vyadi Rupena Shabdataha, Vina Paro Kshanopam, Brahma Shabdevan Uchade. What it means is that you cannot get rid of the disease just by uttering the name of the medicine. Similarly, you cannot attain moksha or liberation just by chanting the name of Brahma. Which brings to the main ethos of Akshayam, which is basically you have to get into the temple functions, you have to volunteer, you have to be present in every single moment of what the temple functions. I think that is something that I want the next generation of Akshayam members to take it from here. I know this Anubhava 2026 has been a great effort. Thank you all for doing this, but I think you need to keep the fire burning, keep the momentum going into next things. You have tremendous opportunities here at this temple. I mean, I don't know of any other temple organizations in North America that has a dedicated youth program, which does so. So I think you should take advantage of it. Be out there, go and represent the temple, go participate in interfaith community sessions, go participate in volunteering and other events, represent the temple in any way, shape, or form. And you're like the main ambassadors of the temple. So do the right thing. So with that being said, thank you so much.
Namaste, everybody. My name is Anish Tripathi. I'm a member of Akshayam. I think for his beautiful service in Akshayam, we had many nice events, many peaceful chanting sessions. It was very nice being with you in Akshayam. Now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Jeffrey Long. Welcome. So, Dr. Jeffrey Long is an American scholar of religious studies. He works on religions and philosophies of India, particularly Hinduism and Jainism. He is Professor of Religion and Asian Studies at Elizabethtown College, Pennsylvania. Dr. Long graduated from the University of Notre Dame. During his time there, he embraced Hinduism and got initiated into the Vedanta, so Sri Ramakrishna Vedanta Society in Boston. He received his master's and PhD at the University of Chicago Divinity School. His PhD thesis was titled Plurality and Relativity, Whitehead, Jainism, and the Deconstruction of Religious Pluralism. He has been working at Elizabethtown College since 2000. Dr. Jeffrey Long has authored 4 books on Hinduism and Jainism. He was a consultant to the Hindu American Foundation during his lawsuit against the California Board of Education. He regularly speaks at the Vedanta centers across the U.S. He also served a 3-year term on the board of trustees at the Hindu American Religious Institute near Hartford, Pennsylvania. We are eager to hear from Dr. Jeffrey Long and about his personal discovery and experience regarding Hinduism. There will be a Q&A session with him towards the end of the presentation. Without further delay, I will introduce our friend with the speech. Please come. Thank you so much.
You might just have to click on the. Can you see me better here or there? There? Okay, I will come here. Should I sit? Yeah, I'm sitting. Take the back. Okay, great. I'm sorry. It's more important to hear me than to see me in any case. So, thank you for that wonderful welcome. Just because we're in a temple and we're in a sacred place, and others have also initiated their talks with some Sanskrit prayers. So I've been introducing. This is a particular favorite of mine from the Upanishads. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Vidyorma Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality.
Peace, peace. So I want to thank you all for inviting me today. I've heard a few weeks ago from Sri Radhinath. We had a Zoom conversation, and as soon as I saw him, I said, oh, I've met him before, because we'd seen each other at the Indian consulate, and so it was wonderful to connect the name to the face and to get to know him, and to be invited here to this wonderful temple. I have written about your temple without actually having been here. I have a book on Hinduism in America, and I give a brief overview of the history of Hindu temples in the U.S. And I mentioned this is the first, right? This is the first independent Hindu temple in the U.S. And ever since I learned about it, I wanted to come and visit, and it just didn't happen for one reason or another. And then I was invited, so it's the perfect occasion. So thank you very, very much for inviting me here. And what Sri Radhinath asked me to do today was to present something, not so much of an academic lecture, but more of a personal sharing, because we're talking about pride in the Hindu tradition, pride in Hindu identity, and I think there's no greater thing to be proud of than to be a part of a tradition that bears really ancient wisdom for the world. And we talk about how ancient it is, how it's been around for a very, very long time. It's sanatan, right? It's eternal. But eternal also means it will be around in the future. Even though it's an ancient tradition, I think of the Hindu tradition actually as very futuristic in a sense. I see this tradition as having answers to many of the very pressing questions that humanity faces today. And I think this is just beginning to be appreciated. Right, from realms all the way from things like land conservation, diet, but also things like consciousness studies and the question of what we are and where we came from. The Hindu tradition has much to offer in this regard. And so I was drawn to it from an early age. And so that's the story I'm going to tell you today. So basically the story of my life, more or less, is what I'm going to share with you. And so it's a personal discovery and experience of Hinduism. So yes, this slide is a series of scenes from my childhood. I grew up in a very small town called Montgomery City, Missouri. I assume most of you have never heard of it, so I've located it on the map there with the little green star. So I want to talk about my background a little bit before I really embark on my journey into the Hindu tradition. So I grew up actually in the Catholic Church, and there's the church that I grew up going to right there in the center, Immaculate Conception Church in Montgomery City, Missouri. And that was the faith of my family. And of course, we regularly went to the Dairy Queen. You can see there's our downtown area. Even to this day, there is no proper traffic light in Montgomery City. There's just one red flashing light in the center of town. That's all you need. It's a very small town. And so I childhood, starting out, I loved science fiction. I loved dinosaurs. I was very interested in the space program. I'm told I watched First Landing, but I don't remember when I was only 4 months old. But I do remember watching the later moon landings, and I was around 3 years old, but I would watch and come back. And of course, we had to drink Tang because that's what the astronauts drink. So these are things I loved and enjoyed. And then I think we can move to the next slide. My childhood was very badly disrupted, and this really proved to be, I think, the decisive moment in my life. I was a small family, no brothers and sisters, mom and dad and me. Though the extended family was very large, lots of aunts and uncles and cousins and so on. But the immediate family was very small. And my father worked for the railroad. And when I was 10 years old, he was in an accident, not a train accident, he was actually in a truck accident. And it left him paralyzed. He was quadriplegic, he couldn't move his arms or legs. And he lived that way for about another 2 years. He passed away when I was 12 years old. And after some time in the hospital and rehab center, we brought him home and converted the living room essentially into a hospital room. And we took care of my dad, mom, and I took care of my father. And I think one of my first lessons in Hindu tradition came from this life experience.
because I realized from living with my dad every day that we are not this physical body. We are not this physical body is important, right? The ana, right? That's part of us. But it's not the whole self. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story from the Upanishads, where Indra, the lord of the Devas, and Virochana, lord of the Asuras, they both go for instruction to Prajapati. And they both want to know, who am I? And so Prajapati shows them a pool of water, and they look and they see their reflection. And Virochana is very satisfied with this. And so he decides, okay, I am this body. And that is the teaching of the Asura, right? Indra is not satisfied with that. He says, this body is going to age, it's going to be injured, it's going to pass away eventually. Right? Even the gods, right? Their bodies pass away, right? At the end of the kalpa, right? They pass on. And so he went back for further instruction. He said, well, what am I really? And Prajapati directed him to the mind, right? So we also talked about just now, manaha. And but then he realized even manaha is also impermanent and changing and inconstant. At one point, as the lady was saying so nicely, sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad. So then finally, Prajapati reveals the truth, right? That you are the Atman, beyond time, space, and causation, beyond change. And I was not yet familiar with Hindu traditions, but I could really see with my father that his body had become a prison. And if your body can become a prison, then you're not your body, right? There's you, and then there's this thing that's a prison, right? And normally it works fine, but this was not. And I've had many loved ones who've died of cancer, right? That's the body turning against you, right? Your body becomes an enemy. So we're not the body, we are something else. And of course, I inherited from the tradition in which I grew up the idea of the immortal soul. So when my father passed on, I had the reassurance that he still existed and he continued on, in his soul, right, as a spiritual being. But there were some things that I was also taught that I didn't entirely agree with. And when you grow up in the Christian tradition, you're taught that heaven and hell, right? So when you pass away, you'll either go to heaven, wonderful place where you'll be there forever with God, joyfully, or hell, which is a terrible punishment for eternity. And I just like a couple of the people mentioned, when they mentioned the passing of parents, and I really enjoyed that presentation, set of presentations we just saw. The loss of a parent is really something that can propel you into a spiritual journey because we depend on our parents so much. So I thought very deeply about well, what happens next? Where did Dad go? Right? What is his situation now? All of us, where do we go? Is there an afterlife at all? Is it really true? And what is it like? And the thing that disturbed me about the heaven and hell model was that I honestly didn't know anybody that I thought was good enough to go to heaven or bad enough to go to hell. We're mostly a mix, right? We're just sort of muddling our way through life, doing the best we can, but sometimes we make fairly serious mistakes. I think to this day, I've never met anyone that was really deeply evil to the core of their being. And I've met maybe a small handful of beings that may be pretty close to perfection, but I don't even know about them, right? Because we don't know what's in our thoughts and so on. So I thought, if the afterlife is somehow connected with justice, right, which is the idea I grew up with, then it should probably be kind of like this life. That it's a mix of joy and sorrow. It's where we're learning to be the kind of being that we're meant to be. And so these were my thoughts that I was having. This is around the time I was 12, 13, right after my father passed away. And there's another idea in the Catholic tradition in which I grew up that I found very useful. And because in the Catholic Church, they talk about a third destination they call purgatory, which is on the way to heaven. I once heard a priest describe it as God's waiting room. And so it's where the soul goes when it has not yet achieved perfection, but it is on the right path, right? So there's that purgatory. That made sense to me. But then I thought, if we still have all of this work to do after we die, we need to go to purgatory because we're not yet perfect. And interestingly, a good translation of karma is actually work. Right? So it's the work we have to do in this life. So then we still have all this work to do. What were we doing here, right? What were we doing in this life? It seems odd that we have this kind of, this physical life, and then you have purgatory where, you work everything out and then you go to heaven. I thought, wouldn't it be much more efficient if we're just already in purgatory now? And then I started thinking, you see the thought process happening. So maybe we are in purgatory now. Maybe we just keep coming back here until we get it right, until we learn everything, until we move on to the next level. And so before I knew anything about Hindu tradition or Buddhist or Jain traditions, other things that I've studied, I had my own sort of theory of karma and rebirth, right? That this is how it made sense to me. And then some other things happened. I think we go to the next slide now. I think many Americans, we think through popular culture. And it really provides the medium by which we create meaning, I think, to a great extent. And if you look back through the centuries in India, the great epics like the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and so on, these were the popular culture of India for a very long time. These people, everyone knew the stories. They were turned into songs. They were turned into stage plays. They were depicted in visual art. And it's how people thought through those stories. People knew those characters like they knew the members of their own family. Well, something I haven't put on this picture, but that was a big part of my life. I already mentioned that on science fiction. I knew, if any of you remember Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, and of course, Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, I knew them like I knew members of my own family. Right? And so as I was, after my father passed away, a couple of things that I encountered through popular culture. I love movies, and my mother and grandmother and I would say, saw the film Gandhi when it came out. Now, I knew nothing about Gandhi. I knew really very little about India, but I was very moved by what was presented, right, as his philosophy. So I started gathering books on Gandhi, whatever I could find from the library and so on. And also something I inherited from my father was a love of music, and as well as music collection. And the band that really grabbed my attention were the Beatles. I'm still a big Beatles fan today. And among the Beatles, the person who I found most interesting was George Harrison. And here you see him with members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in London in 1969. And so the fascination the Beatles had for India, the fact that they went to Rishikesh and studied meditation with Maharishi, the fact that even beyond that, George Harrison became very deeply involved with Islam and was really dedicated to this tradition for the rest of his life. This really grabbed my imagination as well. So I became fascinated by India, and I started again reading whatever I could find. And both Gandhi and George Harrison would quote from this text called the Bhagavad Gita. And I read another book too there, Fritjof Capra's The Tao of Physics, and I was very, very interested in religion and science issues too. He talks about the Bhagavad Gita. So I started thinking, I need to read this Bhagavad Gita. This sounds like a really important book. And then something really interesting happened. We can go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is the parking lot of the Methodist Church in Montgomery City, Missouri. And every year they have a market, an open air market in the parking lot, the flea market. They call it the flea market. And my grandmother used to go to this all the time. She was very artistic, made lots of arts and crafts. So she would sell arts and crafts at the flea market. And I went there to help her set up everything at the table. And I enjoy these flea markets because you could find old used paperback science fiction novels and comic books like that. So I was on the lookout for treasures of that kind. And of course, I was thinking about the Bhagavad Gita that I was not looking for in the parking lot of the Methodist Church. Right? It was not the place that I expected to find that. I thought I'd have to go to a bookstore in St. Louis or something to find the text like that. So I walked over to a table piled with old paperbacks and magazines, and I thought, well, that's where I'll find maybe something interesting. And right on the top was the Bhagavad Gita. I was astounded. I sometimes joke this is the moment I became a born again Hindu, and then you have to add the joke born again and again. But anyway, I think I felt as if God had placed this book in my path. And I picked it up and I opened it, and we'll turn to the next slide, please. I don't think anything is truly random in the universe. What we call chaos is just a highly organized system that we don't understand. And I opened the book, so-called, at random, and this was the page I opened it to. The book is the ISKCON translation of the Bhagavad Gita by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And it's very beautiful illustrations, very rich illustrations. And I opened it to this page, and it shows a man who has died, surrounded by his family who are in mourning. And I thought, that's us, right? That's my family. This has been our experience of the last couple of years. At this point, I was about 14, right? But still very much living in the shadow of what had happened to my father. And why sage doing them compassionately but with detachment? And he sees the divine presence in each of these beings. You see this little picture of Bhagavan Krishna, over the heart of each being. And there's a quote at the bottom. It says, "The blessed Lord said, the wise lives neither the living nor the dead." And that line just that it really struck me. It spoke directly to what I was experiencing at that time. And it gave a page number, page 21. So I turned to page 21. That's on the next slide. And here we have this in the second chapter of the Gita, what Krishna is explaining the process of rebirth. Those who were wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth, and then to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. And it's hard to describe the impact these words have on me. I was already looking for this kind of model of rebirth, as I was explaining a moment ago. And here it was in this book from ancient times from India. It was like, again, coming from a science fiction background, something from another planet, this was really phenomenal. I felt like I was an extraterrestrial who'd been raised by human parents and then discovered an artifact from my home planet in this place. If you remember the old Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, he finds that crystal from the planet Krypton, and that leads into his Fortress of Solomon. The Gita was my crystal from the planet Krypton. And of course, I immediately bought it for 25 cents. Best quarter that I ever spent. And my story just develops from there, right? So I read the Gita, and then I love books. And I come from a family of people who love books. My mother, my grandmother, my aunts, all of them love books. So whenever there's Christmas or birthday or anything, or some special day, we go to the mall. What would you like? I want books. So I would always head straight to the religion and philosophy section of the bookstore. So and this was a fantastic era, right? This was the early 80s. So we had all these wonderful books, translations that had come out a few years before. So I'm reading, Autobiography of a Yogi and Living with the Himalayan Masters and Swami Prabhupada's translations of the Upanishads, the Gita. By the time I was 15, I had 6 different Bhagavad Gitas, right? Different translations by different authors. And looking at multiple traditions. I wanted to cast a wide net and learn from all the traditions. So I read Buddhist texts, I read the Dhammapada, I read the Tao Te Ching, I read the Quran. The Quran thinks that it was like the Old Testament. I thought, okay, I kind of know this, right? But it was different too. It was interesting. What kept really drawing my imagination and what was shaping my worldview was everything I was reading coming from the Hindu tradition. And another book that influenced me a lot was Aldous Huxley's The Perennial Philosophy. Huxley, I later found out, was a follower of Vedanta. He was a disciple of Swami Prabhupada and the Baptist Society of Southern California. In The Perennial Philosophy, he talks about a universal wisdom that underlies all traditions, right? That it's not limited to any one tradition. This made a lot of sense to me because another kind of traumatic moment that occurred to me, not as traumatic, not anywhere approaching what happened to my father, but it still stuck with me. I was with a group of friends, and one of them had invited the rest of us on a camping trip with his extended family. And you ever know the game Uno? So a group of us were playing Uno, And boy, this was a really a notorious Uno game. My friend's cousin decided it was her job to ensure that we all had the right religious beliefs, right? And so she was an evangelical Christian. And she sort of went around the table and asked everyone, what church do you go to? And then she was like passing opinions about those church. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that was just okay. Maybe we should try this one. Came to me and I said Roman Catholic and she actually goes, oh God, right? It was like, she discovered that, the spawn of Satan was right there at the table. And then we started arguing, and she told me I was going, no, I said, you can't say that because Christ says don't judge. You can't say God can say that. You can't say that. And then we got deeper into the conversation, and I said, nobody's good enough to go to heaven or bad enough to go to hell anyway. We just keep coming back. And I talked about the Bhagavad Gita, and then she knew I was going to hell, right? It was just, no question about it. And so I stood my ground, but it shook me up. This is an adult, talking to, at that time, 13-year-old. And, it felt abusive, actually, to me. But it got me thinking about this topic. And I was reading one day one of my books, and there was a collection of quotes from Mahatma Gandhi. And he says, religions are so many roads, so many paths leading to the same destination. What does it matter which road we take so long as we reach the goal? And that makes so much more sense. Much more sense than a world in which you have a few people that God has saved because they practice the right religion. You have these billions of other people, Hindus, Muslims, Jewish people, atheists, the wrong kinds of Christians, right? Like I grew up being, and God would create billions of beings, knowing they were going to follow the wrong religion and go to hell, and yet created them. And it's as if we were created to be damned for eternity. And I thought, what kind of God is that? Right? This sounds like the evil emperor from Star Wars, right? I wanted to join the Rebel Alliance after I thought about that, And so what felt to me and seemed to be logically much more coherent, and I think much more scientific, and I mean scientific in a very broad sense, that truth is there, right? And if you think about the physical world, scientific truth, you have a phenomenon like gravity. And someone would discover it eventually. It was Newton that coined the term and sort of made the initial forays into talking about gravity. So I think there were some precursors in India too, but then you have Einstein further developing the concept and so on. But when we talk about physics, when we talk about biology, when we talk about chemistry, we don't talk about American biology and Russian physics, French chemistry. It's just chemistry. It's just biology. And you go to a university in India, you go to IIT Delhi, or you go to MIT in Boston. You're studying the same things, right? Because we're looking at the same universe and making observations about it. It makes sense to me that the spiritual realm would be the same. That if we're talking about concepts like, and I'll use the Western terms, but as you know, Sanskrit has much more refined terminology for these things. But we're talking about divinity, talking about the soul, and so on. Wouldn't it stand to reason that these things have also been observed by people through time? And they've described it using the terminology that they knew well. And I'm going to jump forward a little bit in my story, but my thinking on this is that what we see in the Hindu tradition is that a very rich compilation of wisdom about this realm has been preserved through time. And such compilations might have existed in other civilizations in times in history, but much of it has been destroyed or forgotten. But in India, it's been preserved. And India is one of the oldest, maybe the oldest continuous civilization, going back thousands of years. And because there's this idea of openness, one of the earlier speakers mentioned it, you have different Hindu systems of thought, right, that exist. And so all of the perspectives on reality that have developed in India through time are embedded within and remain as part of this really vast repository of knowledge. So I felt more and more drawn to this way of thinking as I was getting older. But I was still a Catholic boy. I was still going to church. In fact, I was still wanting to be a priest. And I think we could probably go to, there's one more slide about the afterlife. This is just a beautiful commentary by Prabhupada on the verse that I was just discussing. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there's no cause for lamentation, regardless of the material body. So we go to the next slide. I went to a Catholic university. I went to University of Notre Dame. Well, I was accepted there for one thing, but they actually invited me to their honors program, which I consider a great compliment. So I went to Notre Dame. It was still in the Midwest, but it's in Indiana. So it was away from home, but it wasn't too far away. And while I was there, I studied theology, and I was in a program called the Program of Liberal Studies, great books program. And so we read original sources in a variety of fields. So our science course, for example, consisted of actually reading Euclid and Newton and Einstein, and thinking the great thoughts with the great masters. That was the philosophy behind the program. So it was a wonderful place to learn, a wonderful place to study. But my Catholic friends are always dismayed by this, because it was while I was studying at this great Catholic university that I really realized I wasn't Catholic anymore, that I'm really Hindu in my thinking. And one of the next kind of decisive turning points in my story was I met an English professor there. His name is, I believe he's retired now, Dr. Stephen Fredman. And he is a devotee of a Hindu teacher, of Guru Mai. She is the inheritor of the Siddha Yoga lineage, which Swami Bhuttananda brought to the US back in the 70s. And so I met a friend who was also part of that lineage. She was a student from Hawaii. And she told me about Dr. Fredman. She said, oh, you should sit in on his class. His class was fantastic. Again, he's an English professor. His focus is American literature, but he's also a devotee. And so we read Ralph Waldo Emerson in conjunction with the Upanishads, Henry David Thoreau in conjunction with the Gita, and Walt Whitman in conjunction with Bhakti poets. And it was beautiful. You could see the synergy between these American poets and the wisdom of India. But Dr. Fredman also, every Tuesday evening, he had satsang at his house in South Bend, Indiana. And we would go, and they would, this is, for the young folks, this is long ago, we watched VHS, things called videotapes. And we watched video recordings of Guru Mai talk, and then we would have chanting, and then we would have silent meditation. And then we would go downstairs and they'd be cookies and conversation. And I have to tell you that going to, and I still have a deep regard for the Catholic Church. I'm not anti-Catholic. I just didn't feel at home anymore. And I had gone to Mass all my life, and as the words and the prayers would be recited, the creed and so on, I had to kind of translate it into my mind to make it something that I could say. It's like, okay, well, they say resurrection, but I'm birth, that sort of thing. I had my Vedanta theology that I was trying to fit into the Catholic mold. And I went to the very first satsang I was like, oh, this is such a, I just agree with everything that's being said, and I don't have to translate it in my mind into something else. And it's like if you've ever had a pair of shoes that gave you blisters and it hurt, and then you found some shoes that actually fit. It was it's like I found my home. And so stopped going to Mass, started going to satsang every week. And then at the same time, I also met another professor who taught the kinds of courses that I teach now at Elizabethtown College. And so his name was Paul Griffiths. And he was teaching, he did a course on Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. I loved his class. And after the first day of class, I followed him back to his office. And I said, I want to do what you do. This is how I want to spend my life, learning about these things and sharing it with them. So he began to advise me, and he recommended that I go for graduate school to the University of Chicago. And as good fortune would have it, at the same time that I was in the process of applying to Chicago, he was offered a job there. So I continued to work with him at the University of Chicago. So we go to the next slide. Here is Siddha Yoga. And there's Guru Mai on the right, and then here you see the system of chakras. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. I learned about this really for the first time through practice. And I remember a few years ago, I wrote a piece on the chakras, and it was peer reviewed. And one of the peer reviewers, I think, was a skeptic. And he said, very good article, but this author writes about these things as if they actually exist, and he was very confused about that. And well, I won't say much except that they really do exist. You felt them activate. You know they exist. That's not unreal. If we go on to the next slide, this is the University of Chicago. So I was a student there for many years. I did my master's and PhD there, and also spent a couple of years in India. And one of the things that I think this is really the most decisive moment of all in my life, even beyond what happened with my father, is while a student at Chicago, I met a scholar of Japanese studies from India, this lady here who's in the front row, and we celebrated our 31st wedding anniversary just last month. If we go to the next slide, I spent a couple of years in India, and we got married we wanted to be married in the Arya Samaj Mandir. Not because we had deeper attachment to the Arya Samaj. We have a lot of friends in Arya Samaj, but it was near where, near the university, and it's just a very beautiful place. And so, but there was a requirement that if you were going to have a Hindu wedding, you needed to be Hindu. And I thought, well, I am already, right? And I don't know if I qualify, but my worldview, my practice, all of that is now coming from. But I formally joined the tradition, and it's actually a certificate from the government of India, of my becoming Hindu. And I was at an event a few years ago in Princeton, and I don't know how many of you know Vinny Chandler, the Hindu chaplain at Princeton. He was coordinating the event. And there were four of us on stage, and all practicing Hindus, but also scholars of religion. And the topic was how we negotiate, navigate being both insider and outsider, right? Practitioner, but also try to be an objective scholar and so on. And I told my story, and Vinny said, "You are the only certified Hindu on the stage." So I had my certification. And so yeah, you see a much younger and thinner me there getting married. Mom and I might have changed at all, but there we are. So we go to the next slide. I've included this slide because I wanted to comment on something else. A question that comes up a lot, that I am asked, and that also comes up in the sort of general public discourse about people who are not born Hindu who adopt the tradition or are adopted by the tradition, is how welcome are you? Do you really feel included? Do you really do other Hindus regard you as a real Hindu, and so on? Now, it's not that people shower me with flowers wherever I go. But I think this picture is sort of emblematic of I've received such a warm welcome. I can't say, I can't put it into words, but I mean, here I am up here on the stage talking to all of you, right, in the oldest temple in America. I cannot put into words how grateful I am and how welcome that I have been. And part of that feeling of gratitude stems from the fact that there were people, not Hindus, all of them, telling me that I would not be welcome in the tradition, right? When I was studying, and I said, well, I want to write, I want to do Hindu philosophy and theology, but from within the tradition, not as an outsider, And one person in particular, he said, they'll never accept you. You're not born in the tradition. You're not a Brahmin. They said stuff, he said all that. Years later, he took it back. I'm very happy to say. But at that time, this is what I was being told. But no, I've had just an incredible welcome in the tradition. If we go to the next slide, it depicts Elizabethtown College, tiny little college in Pennsylvania. And this is where I got my first job, and it's still my job. I stick there. I did have the opportunity to leave at one point, but we chose to stay. They hired both of us. Mama started the Japanese program at Elizabethtown College, and I was hired in the religious studies department. This building on the left is our library, and if you look at that sort of tower or churros, and you go to the first floor, you see those large windows. It's this big, beautiful, spacious room with a wonderful view of the outside. I refer to it as the Jedi Council Chamber. If you've seen the Star Wars prequels, you know that the Jedi Council Chamber is this big round room with big windows. Every month I hold a meditation program there for students who are interested. A lot of my students want to learn how to do meditation. I don't do it in the classroom for a variety of reasons. Some people do teach meditation in the classroom. I don't think it's really, the classroom is really quite the place for meditation for a variety of reasons. So I make it available outside of class and meditate there. So we've been there for a long time. And if we go to the next slide, you see our local Hindu temple. And it doesn't look like a traditional Hindu temple, but it was designed by a member of the community and built in 1985. The temple community actually started in 1975 with not too much after this temple was begun, but they met in people's houses. And then they purchased a building that had been a church. And but it was old and there were problems. There were some wiring issues and it actually burned. The building burned. But by that time, the community had grown enough that they bought a piece of land, beautiful piece of land out in the woods up on a hill. And an architect who was a member of the temple community designed the building. So it was built in 85. And the community has continued to grow. And so the two wings of the temple that you see there, those were actually added in 1995 to accommodate a large number of people. Since then, the community is still growing, and the current project is to try to expand the parking lot. Because on Diwali, it's just impossible, right? People are parking out of the road, neighbors get irritable, and these things happen. But this has been, again, a wonderfully welcoming community for both of us. At one point, I taught in the Sunday school, and I was asked, would you be willing to teach in the Sunday school? I said, well, this sounds like wonderful seva. I would be honored to do it. And I was thinking, I would be teaching a class on Hindu philosophy. And they said, we'd like you to teach the SAT English prep course. And so I did. I said, okay, that's what you need. That's what I'll do. So I taught the prep course. I was very proud to do that for a couple of years. And then at another point, they said, we need some programming for bored adults who are sitting waiting for their kids to finish Sunday school. Could you lead a discussion, attend a discussion group on the Yoga Sutra at one point? That was a nice program. And then, as was mentioned in that very kind introduction, I served on the board of trustees also years of the temple. And any of you who've ever been on the board of the temple, again, we think of a temple, we think of the devatas, we think of puja, we think of bhakti. But if you're on the board, you're learning about parking permits, sanitation, and the land, and how much the land costs, and negotiating with the township. And that's what we were doing. The laukika, the worldly part is also very important, and that's what we take care of. But that continues to be our home, and it's a Rama temple. The central deity is the Rama. So you see Rama, Lakshmana, Sita, Hanuman. There are also various other devatas, including a Bhagwan Mahadir from the Jain tradition. And the Jain community is part of our Hindu temple community. And another interest of mine has been the Jain tradition and the ahimsa, the system of logic, that the Jains use. This is a part of my academic work. In fact, if we go to the next slide, this talks about the Vedanta tradition. And this is the particular tradition in which we are located. And so there you see Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa in the central photograph, his wife and companion, the Holy Mother Sharada Devi, and then to his right, Swami Vivekananda, who of course was the first Hindu teacher to really spread the tradition here in the Western world. And I feel a special bond with and a special debt to Swami Vivekananda because he opened people who look like me, right? He opened the tradition with people like Sister Nivedita, who was Irish, just like my family's Irish. And he opened the tradition to the Western world and really showed that it has universal relevance. Our Guruji, from whom we took Diksha, is here. This is, some of you might know him, Swami Kagananda from the Boston Ramakrishna Vedanta Center. We go to the next slide. Now, this is probably going to surprise people, but I actually do some work as a Purohit, as a priest. And how did that happen? I mean, being Hindu is one thing, but how do you get involved in this? So there's a funny story there. Early in our career in Azurtown College, we had a fairly large number of students from Nepal, mostly Hindu, and then a few also from India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka. And so we began having Diwali celebrations. And as part of that, we would do the Lakshmi Puja. And we did this, for the students. Then we would have, prasad, snacks, and so on, and people would enjoy it. And around, I think it was 2007, Arun Gandhi, who was a grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, came to give us an address at our college. And so Mom and I got to know him. And it was our job to take him around, drive him between the college and the hotel, take him to the airport, and so on. And so we became friends. And then a few months later, he and I were both asked to represent at an event organized by the Institutes of Mental Health in Rockville, Maryland on suicide prevention. Because it was on interfaith suicide prevention. And there was also a Buddhist representative from Pittsburgh. One of the funniest moments I remember from that because we were all interested in suicide prevention and the resources in our traditions for preventing it. The vast majority of people that were there who were from different Christian traditions. There were a couple of rabbis and a couple of Islamic representatives, but the rest of them were horrified, appalled at one point when the Buddhist representative from Pittsburgh and Arun and I said, well, our traditions don't condemn suicide. We don't think that person has done something evil. We think it's tragic, but it's, and in some cases, very dignified. When you look at there are traditions where people reach a certain age, maybe it's difficult for them to do their duties anymore, and they decide voluntarily to leave the body. That's considered very holy and dignified. Oh, they thought we were terrible for saying that, but this is how he and I bonded. And then about a month after that, he called and he said, "My grandson is getting married at Cornell University in the chapel, and I want you to perform the ceremony." And I said, "I don't know about that. I'm not a proper word." He knew we didn't put judges and things. But he said he wanted someone who could explain very clearly, because the bride was not Hindu and not of Indian background. So a lot of the guests would not have any idea what's going on in the ceremony. I said, "Why don't you get a proper priest, and then I can explain the ceremony as it's happening." And he said, "No, I want you to do it." So you don't say no to Gandhi. So I found a book which was a guide to how to perform a Hindu wedding. It's by Dr. A.B. Srinivas. It's Purohit, originally from Karnataka. He's based in Boston, Connecticut. Some of you might be acquainted with him, and he's written some wonderful books, including Hinduism for Them and Dummies, which is his second edition. I used his book, and we performed the wedding. And I think the best feedback I got, the best compliment I got was when people said to me, "How often do you do these?" And I said, "I've never done this before." And they were surprised. They thought it looked like I did it a lot. So I don't okay, that must be good. But then one person said, "How did you learn?" I said, "Well, there's this book." And I told him about the book. And he said, "Oh, I know that was." So he connected us. And then one summer, Mom and I went up to his house. And we met his wife, Kamla, we met his daughter, Asha, who's the Hindu child at Yale. And with some other families, we learned how to share the baby monsters. And I've done 5 weddings since that first one. One was from the brother of the first. One was from the brother of the first group, and then that was a compliment. His brother liked the wedding so much he had us do that one. And then one family recently hired me to do that. They wanted Dr. Srinivasan to do it, but they wanted him to travel to Pennsylvania. He said, "I have someone in Pennsylvania who can do it." So I got him to do it. So he's my group regarding to do weddings, so I get to do it. The others have all been for couples who were my students, actually. And this is Christian and Kelsey. They met in my Indian philosophy class and got married. And and Mom was always my assistant on TV. So if you look at the next slide, this is more my academic side, right? So I've published or edited a few books, and also written quite a few articles, given talks. And this is sort of my way of trying to express what I'm expressing to all of you to the wider world, but in an academic mode, right? Raising awareness and trying to convey more accurate knowledge about Hindu tradition, Jain tradition, and also Buddhist tradition to the wider world. As you all well know, most Americans don't know anything about any of this, right? And what people think they know is often not correct or distorted. And so there is a need for more accessible information. And because I teach college students who have no background for the most part, I don't have graduate students or anything like that. I've learned how to explain things in a way that's simple for people to understand. So this is a lot of my go-to textbooks. So Discovering Indian Philosophy, Hinduism in America, Jainism, production. These are all used in university courses. I've got a reference work there, and so on. So we go on to the next slide. And yeah, this is just sort of the story of how being part of this tradition has enabled me to meet such an interesting and wonderful collective of people, the Hindu community in America, Hindu and Jain community in America, Hindu and Jain communities in India, and then a lot of other people who are sort of well-wishers to this kind of philosophy, right, that is holistic, that is transcendental, that looks beyond differences. And so there was someone who, gentleman who works for the United Nations. We attended a talk I gave at the Vedanta Society of New York one summer. And he said, oh, would you like to come and speak for, World Yoga Day at the UN? I'd love to, that would be an honor. And that's where, in fact, they asked me back. In 2019, I did 2 talks at the UN. And then we go to the next slide. I was very humbled to get something called the International Ahimsa Award at the Indian Consulate. This was in New York. And this is where I think I met Dr. Masorka for the first time. Though I had seen her on television on the Stephen Colbert show, and I had used that for many years in my classes because she explained everything so well. And it was such humor and grace. And then if we go to the next slide, now I've been on TV. The History Channel was a little odd, but PBS there was a really I want to say a nice documentary on Swami Vivekananda called America's First Guru, which I highly recommend. I'm in it for 30 seconds. It's not about me, but the point of this is that getting onto this path, I have been warmly welcomed, and I have found that it has connected me in very profound ways with the wider world, which I never really imagined growing up in a small town in Missouri, right? And so I think this is divine grace, and I also think it's significant that in some ways I think it goes against some kind of negative narratives that are out there in the world, right? Like at different points in my career, in my life, I've had people say, oh, if you embrace Hinduism openly, you can kiss your scholarly career goodbye, right? Everyone will think you're a kook, and you gone native, and all these kinds of racist things that people would say. And I think I inherit this from my family too. I just don't care. I'm independent, and that the opposite. And I think that we're in an era. Maybe there's a little bit of a backlash going on at this exact perfect time, but we're moving toward a more open and accepting world on the whole. And but we can't take that for granted. And as people who are committed to Hindu tradition and who are proud of its values, I think we need to stand for those values of acceptance, of openness, and of seeing beyond the material, right? Seeing beyond the surface level of life. We go to the next slide. These are our Diwali celebrations. After all of our Nepali students graduated, we didn't need Hindu students for many years, and we eventually stopped having the Diwali observance. And then we began to have a few more Hindu students, and one of them said to me, Dr. Omar, we need to do something for Diwali. I said, well, we used to. So we brought it back, and now we're doing this every year. It's always very well attended, and we're not getting more Indian students at the college. Next slide, please. So, how do I think about all of this, right? People will often say, when you grew up Catholic, did your family accept all of this? What do they think of it? They accepted it because I think they always thought I was a little strange. So this is just kind of an extension of my, personal idiosyncrasy. But one of my recent research has been on fellow Westerners like myself who've been drawn to Hindu traditions. So I've been doing a lot of work on George Harris, and I came across this beautiful letter that he wrote to his mother. And this letter resonates with me and my own understanding of what it means to be Hindu. So this is my last slide. He's writing to his mother, who was worried when all these reports were coming about the Beatles studying meditation with the Maharishi and so on. So he writes this very frank letter to his mom. He said, "Thanks to your mother last week, and if it's any comfort to you, don't worry about me or think anything negative about Maharishi. He's not phoning. He's not taking any of our money. All he's doing is teaching us how to contact God." I love the way he says that all he's doing is how to contact God. It's the most amazing thing, right? And as God is not divided into different sects, as our religious leaders here make out by their prejudices, it doesn't affect my dedication to Sacred Heart in any way. That's the Catholic Church in which you grew up in Liverpool. It only strengthens it. Don't think that I've gone off my rocker, because I haven't. But now I love you and everybody else much more than ever. So it's not bad. I think that's how I'll conclude my version.
Can we open up for some questions?
Absolutely. Well, if I haven't already talked to them.
Yeah. Thank you. That was beautiful. Love to know more about it. So it's all pretty good, I'm guessing, right? And the generation we have here is mostly Australian. So.
Yeah. In the era of Stranger Things is occurring, I was the age of those kids. I got fun watching their childhood.
I just want to ask. Oh. So me, my friends here, discussing this. I want to take your perspective on. So we've come to this notion that we are born into Hindu. So the whole world is Hindu. And then we see a Catholic here, and a Jew here, and a Muslim here. And we say hello and we don't discriminate. And we're happy to also be involved with different their ideas and thoughts, have that mutual dialogue. It, as an educator, it has been quite difficult for me to pass that on to non-Hindus. And I was a little more sort of warm-hearted at this. So I want to get your input on how to make it understandable, because there's so many misconceptions. There are other students, we talk about the other students who are like, oh, this is evil. We should have participated, and the parents are fine because it's oh, my mom won't let me do that, or you're a sinner. So we grasp that understanding together, basically.
Well,
I know that was a long thing.
no, that's great. And this question preoccupies me a lot because, and I've seen a shift in our students, but especially early, when I was early in my career, when I was first in Elizabethtown. I was very, very conservative Christians, and again, something I've had students tell me, oh, I can't do field trips to the Hindu temple because my grandmother thinks I'll go to hell, right? Or they're worried about it. And then it's an alternative assignment. I said, okay, you don't have to go, then you have to write, do a short write-up for you, the other for writing about their experience in the temple. Then I want to do a short write-up of similar length about why you didn't go and reflect on it, right? And so, thinking about, understanding the theology there. In some ways, we, coming from a Hindu perspective, are inhibited in one sense because we also don't think it's proper to try to force or impose our view on others. Much though we might like to sometimes. Okay, why are you guys so narrow and intolerant? Right? But we, I want to be as respectful as I can to the traditions and beliefs of my students. But I'm also very open about where I'm coming from and why I don't agree with that point. And I always say, you don't have to agree with me. I've had very conservative students come back and take multiple courses with me. So they're managing comfortable in the classroom. But I think in some ways, some of them, they kind of keep the material at arm's length in their mind. Well, that's what Hindus believe. I am here doing Christian things. And so they just learn on that level. But I don't think they get the full benefit of the knowledge then. Whereas a lot of students embrace the whole thing, and I don't know how many consider themselves Hindu after class. I have had some come and say, "Mark, we study it more, because you just taken one class for me, that's not going to give you, that much. You need to talk to people who are much wiser and who have been steeped in it for generations. Like, you don't even have to want to think about something like that." But I have one student who said, wrote this on course evaluation. He says, it's not so much that we learn new ideas as that the ideas help us learn about ourselves. They open the mind to itself. So I think it's the teachings themselves that are powerful. And this does attract people, and it kind of wears down their negativity after a while. Because the class and all they know about Hinduism is, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, they're not going to have a positive view. But once they start learning what Hindu traditions actually teach, then they love it actually. They say, oh, and I also find that I have now the student population has changed. They're not so conservative. In fact, quite a few of them don't like religion at all. So they come into the class with a different type of resistance. Oh, religion, this is going to be more, they assume all religions are in the same mold as whatever conservative form of Christianity they're rebelling against. So they think, well, it's just going to be the same thing, but with, Vishnu instead of Jesus, or something like that. And then when they learn what it actually is, they're like, oh, this is very different from how I thought religion would be. And then some of them also say, well, maybe we should call it a religion. Call it something like that. And in fact, the main course I teach, I call it Dharma traditions. Actually, it talks about Hindu, Jain, Buddhist traditions. And they start using that terminology, Dharma, instead of religion. It creates less resistance. So these are all kind of strategies to use. But another argument I give when I have these kind of exchanges like we kind of been talking about is a pragmatic one. What kind of world do we want to live in? Because it's Swami Vivekananda himself said, is that you think there's going to be harmony of religions because everyone is going to convert to yoga, and there'll be no more other religion. That is a vain hope. That's never going to happen. So do you want a world where we're fighting all of the time about our different beliefs? Or do we want a world where we coexist because even if we don't agree, we can appreciate that the other perspective has some value and enables us to learn something that we didn't learn? So that's the thing to ask. It's like, okay, so do we want just people to hate each other? Then that's no kind of world to live in.
Hi, Dr. Long. Thank you so much for making time to come speak with us today. It seems like you kind of naturally felt that you were agreeing with a lot of the principles of Sanatana Dharma as you sort of eased into it. I'm curious if there were any concepts, experiences that you either found very difficult to grapple with and how you dealt with that, either in your own sort of journey of self-discovery or in communicating it with other people.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And yeah, there is one which leaps out. And it's an aspect of, I won't even say Sanatana Dharma, it's an aspect of Indian culture that sometimes it seems to be the only thing that students study when they learn about the Hindu tradition. And that is what is something called by caste system. Okay? And so as a consequence of that, for many years, even though I agreed with the philosophy and I agreed with what I was learning about the tradition, I had this idea that I could never be part of it because a conservative interpretation of that system. You're born to it, and you are whatever jati you are for life. It doesn't change, and that's it, right? You're stuck. And so I thought, well, maybe in some future life I'll be born here, right? I remember, thinking that. And then I got to actually know the community, and I got to reviews on this topic very enormously. And then I started looking at some of the major thinkers of, especially this actually goes all the way back to ancient times, but if I'm just going to confine myself to the modern period, you have someone like Swami Vivekananda describing caste prejudice, not the system necessarily per se, but the feeling of superiority over other people. He's very blunt, as Swamiji always was. He said, it's a form of mental disease. I was so relieved when I read that. It's like, okay, he felt bad about it too. And when he was, after he became a sannyasi and after Ramakrishna said that his body, before he came to America, he wandered the length and breadth of India just as an ordinary sannyasi, was not well known or anything. And he saw how people suffered as a result of the way this system was practiced in certain parts of the country. But the way I've dealt with it is through the realization that, and I'm going to use the Western term religion here. In terms of religion, you can be a perfectly good Hindu and not really have any kind of connection at all to that system, right? And again, like what Swamiji brought to the Western world was almost designed that way. Like it doesn't matter, right? Birth is done by economic history. But I would say probably the most powerful statement I've seen comes from the Upanishads. If you go back to the Chandogya Upanishad, I'm sure a lot of you know this story. The story of Satyakam, right?
who does not know his father, does not know his father's Jati Ruhani, right? And his mother is a servant woman. So in sort of classical text, that would be considered a lower one. And when he has to recite his lineage to his teacher, he's just honest. He says, well, I'm the son of Jabala, who's a servant. And I don't know who my father is, and I will tell you the Vedas, please teach. And did anyone know how Gautama reacts to this blunt statement? It's fantastic. He says, only a Brahmin could be so honest. And he initiates a tradition, and Satyakama goes on to be one of the great rishis. So, Valmiki, the author of the Ramayana, right? He came from a servant community, right? And composed probably the most powerful Sanskrit poem there is. I think that this concept, I don't think of it as authentically part of the ideals of individuals. I think it's a social practice that over time got distorted. And in fact, we now know too that a lot of the distortions that occurred in it, in its actual practice, were due to foreign invasions, right? That the British, thinking they were being very enlightened, said, okay, we're going to use the laws of the natives to manage their society. So if a case involved Muslim subjects, they use Sharia. And if it involved Hindus, they use Dharmashastra. So how much Dharmashastra would they know? Well, they do Manusmriti, right? And that's it. That's all they do. But then they made another mistake. Because Manusmriti is one of the Dharma texts, anyway. But they also used it like they used case law in Britain. And neither Sharia nor Dharma are set up that way, right? If you read like the Manusmriti, and even the Manusmriti, I think it has some passages in it that I think are unfortunate, but it's a much of a lying text. There's also metaphysics, there's a lot of other things going on in the Manusmriti. And if you read it, it's not saying this is the system of laws that one must rigidly follow. And in fact, early in the text, there's this whole section that says if you're uncertain what to do in a given circumstance, there are various options, right, that are considered important. Right? So follow the best one that you can in your circumstance. Now, maybe your circumstance is so unusual that you can't even do any of those. What do you? Well, then ask wise people and follow the example of good people in your community and do what they do. And maybe that's not even available to you. You're in America, I think you're in some place for this. But it says, follow your conscience and do what you want. It says that. And so, I've taught some of this material to my students. They've been shocked to see, for example, that there'll be a practice that is, first it's mentioned, it's okay, this practice is forbidden. And then the next passage it will say, but if you do this, here's the correct way, right? And so on, right? It's adaptable. It is meant to fit with the situations of our lives, not as a kind of very rigid law that a judge imposes and bangs the gavel and says, okay, that's what you have to do. But it became that way under the British Raj. And there's really good scholarship on this, right? This is not this isn't an RSS talking point, right? There's like really good scholars, who studied this and said, yeah, the system in its current form bears little resemblance to the Dharma of ancient times. And in fact, D.R. Nagaraj, a great Dalit scholar who taught for a while in Chicago, is presenting almost that in his class. I've read some of his books, and he talks about this. He talks about it, for example, that a lot of the way the Varnas were understood in ancient times, they were seen as mutually dependent. So, and there were rituals where a member of each of the four Varnas had to participate. It wasn't just the Brahmins who did rituals and everyone else was doing something else. So it was an organic understanding of society. And I mentioned Dr. Srinivasan earlier, he's written a piece on this, and people say, well, the Shrimas are described as the feet, right? And that's a terrible thing, right? Couldn't get far enough without your feet, right? And interestingly, the Vedic texts don't give us an indication of how you end up being in one of these minds. And that idea of it's by birth comes quite a bit later, and not in the truth. It's always in Smriti, which is not on the same level of the already.
So yeah, that's a short history of my struggles with that concept because that's the one thing that always sort of got thrown out to me as a difficulty if you want to be practicing.
I have a question. Namaste. I have a question. Two questions. This how practical is this Manushriti? Whether you are in the US or in India, even in India they don't follow certain of the principles of Manushriti. That's the first question. Second question, totally different. How do you raise kids when there is duality? Means at home, I have to do my own samskar with all procedures or principles and ethics. When I go out to school or college or wherever I am, I have to wear a totally different hat. What is your advice to the younger generation?
Okay, so the first question about how practical is the English today? My Hindu answer, right, is not my scholarly answer. My Hindu answer is in the Kali Yuga, really, it's not practical. Right? That in the Kali Yuga, things have changed a lot. And I think we're now in a mode of life where doing things in a democratic way is what we have to do, right? And so I think that there are things in the text that can be informative and that can be useful, but in terms of applying it in the way, say, the British wanted to do, and I think that I don't think it fits for this era. And Swami Vivekananda himself actually said this. He said it was useful at one time, but the Smritis, as opposed to the Shruti, which is eternally valid, the Smritis are valid for a particular time and a particular place. So we're in a different time. So that's what I would say to that. In terms of the double role, well, first of all, anything about raising kids, I do want to point out that I don't have any. So taking advice from me on that is like when Catholic priests give marriage advice. You know, it's sort of like everyone says, "What are these guys?" You know that. So I can say he's a teacher though, and yeah, you talked about having this as a playing a dual role in our society. And I think I understand what you mean by that, right? That in your home and in your personal life, you're wanting to abide by norms as best as possible and convey that to your children. But that they are flooded with unharming imagery and concepts through their phones, through TV, through their fellow students, and so on. And I would say a couple of things. One is that just being the best possible living example that you can in your own life. I think that we're teaching children all the time, even when we don't know it. And so when parents get angry with each other, when they yell abusive things to each other and so on, they think, oh, the kids don't know, the kids don't understand. The kids know, right? Because I remember things going all the way back very early in my childhood, and they know and it stays with them. And so when they're doing that, they're also teaching their children, oh, this is how to behave in a certain way, right? And it's not a coincidence that people who have been abused often become abusers. Like if you look at an abusive person and you look at the history, at first time they go, this is a person, and then you go back to their childhood, it's like, oh, this is a child still crying out for help, and they don't know as an adult how to process those feelings. So to be harmed, right, I think is the best way to teach. Yeah, answer their questions. And I think this also requires Hindu parents to be knowledgeable about the tradition. And I know that some damage has been done in America by the fact that not everyone who's come has been knowledgeable about the tradition. And I think that's why these, Akshayam and, Sunday schools are really a great innovation in America. Because as I tell my students when I talk about Hinduism in America, when you're living in India, Hinduism is everywhere. Right, you get in a cab and the guy has this little Ganesh Murthy on the dash, right? It's everywhere. Your budget's right in your malls. And in America, you have to create that environment. And so which has been beautifully done in places like this. So bringing your children into this kind of environment, I think is another big part of it. The other thing I would say too is to be diligent about it, but not to be too anxious about it. Because another thing I've also observed, I'm not getting old enough. Some of you, I think, are probably close to me in age. Even if they drift away from it, they will come back because they'll become parents, and then they'll start to realize, oh my gosh, my children are learning all kinds of horrible, selfish, materialistic things. What do I do about this? And then they start coming back to the temple.
and they start learning about it. So, or, I mean, heaven forbid, but they have a tragedy like what I had as a child, and it makes them think what's really important in my life. I love that one thing one young woman said, who am I? You know, this question Ramana Maharshi, Srila Maharshi asks. Who am I? So to have the confidence that even if they don't seem to be respecting it now, I think it's very likely that they will. Because as they get older, they realize, my parents really did know something. And they'll come back.
Thank you. Can we end up with one more last question?
Yeah.
We can have more questions during the lunch section. So informally, we can have more, but
Thank you for your lecture today. Listening to your that you also. I was very interested to see this. You're finding one of that flea market.
Yes.
Have you had any synchronous movements after that? It's extension of your art that you want to do every time. You must have certain experiences also right here.
I have, and I don't know how many I can talk about, but I have had these kinds of experiences. And in fact, one thing that my wife and I talk about sometimes is that, one can be skeptical and say, well, it's just a coincidence. But after they keep happening, after a while, taking a skeptical stance actually seems irrational. It's like you're sort of clinging to a skeptical faith. This must be coincidence. And I think people do that because they're afraid of the alternative, which is that it's really all true, right? And then they have to rethink their lives. And so, I haven't had other experiences of that as well. And I talked about it which was relevant to my topic today, but I have other.
Such an engaging presentation. We are so fortunate to have Dr. Longmire present. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that your journey really is one of one. It was really fascinating. You're a scholar, you're an educator, a practitioner, and they really embody so many different identities that one can have some of them at the same time. And I think that speaks to the universal values of our tradition, the universal application for the reason that we are having this of our event. Really embodies why we have pride in Hindu identity. So on behalf of the temple, I'd like to welcome Sivacharya to provide you with a token of our appreciation and gratitude from the temple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we'll have about a 20-minute lunch break. A couple of reminders. First, we'll be having some more programming after, so please stick around. We'll be having, actually, I'm not going to spoil it, but maybe you'll see it on the scheduling. And also, if you join but you do not sign in, we have two different areas where you can sign in at the registration table. One is for Akshayam members, for guests that are there in contact with the temple. So please do that if you haven't already. Please here and enjoy lunch. Yeah, lunch is in the very back. We'll have a full serving.
Ask him to join for.
Akshayam members, if you can please come to the front. Akshayam members, we'll take a quick photo.
Yeah.